Alright, so let's get straight into this. Hope you're all doing well. And I know a lot of people are very confused right now about where the market is headed, what is going on. So here we're going to break it all down. We're going to go over the technical analysis. I'll tell you what I think about this whole Trump thing, Iran war that's going on. And we will discuss how all of this may affect the energy sector at the end. And that's it. If you want to join the community, you have the link right on top. If you have a 30-second attention span, you should be out by now. And so let's get straight into this. So what we see here is the S&P. Some of you guys feel like the market has been bullish in the last several sessions. Well, if you kind of zoom out just a little bit, you're going to realize it has not been bullish at all whatsoever. In fact, we've been sort of moving downwards on a very gradual, steady pace in a very accurate, precise channel. That the bottom have been retested multiple times. There's a more narrower channel, wider channel. You guys seen those? If you maybe will be able to kind of piece through the noise, what it is that I'm trying to say here. Now that we zoomed out a little bit further out, we can see that I warned about this very same thing. Now, some of you that have been following the channel see a little bit of a difference. Yes, this circle was a little bit up top here, and that's exactly what I said in that last video. And I mentioned how basically we are about to get a sort of potentially asymmetrical symmetry sort of behavior, but I wouldn't jump and say, well, Greg, you're incorrect. Look, we dropped that low. It's not about a precise range that we knew we're going to be in, but rather a harmonic sort of structure that has to happen on the right side of things, on the back end of things. It does not have to match in terms of ranges, and I warned and spoke about this. In fact, as we kept on going, I kept on warning and saying, of course, mostly updating up to speed my community, primary to updating everyone else, talking about how this may end up tittering a little bit lower. Of course, still breaking back up. You see this low may not differ much from this low in terms of overall structure. We're going to see exactly what we mean right here in terms of momentum, because momentum currently is saying the following thing. So if we objectively pay attention to what we've been doing through the last two sessions, we've kind of been moving sideways within two support and resistance levels that we're quite well aware of. That's 6,606. In reality, those who understand a little bit better what's going on, we are revolving still around that 6,666.66 level, which is a very strong psychological level, and I've warned all about how we're gonna retest it back again. In fact, I sort of warned about this quite a while back. Those who are in the community, of course, are well aware. Now, if we want to look at the longer duration, which is the 30 minutes, as we can see, we are objectively bullish, but we are seeing some convergence building up right here, potentially now being stuck at that level to move a little bit more sideways and break more down. So basically a little bit more bearish. Are we bullish or bearish here? Well, objectively we are bullish, potentially creating some sort of a retest right here at 6619.83. So again, we have a little bit more bullish momentum right here, giving us more confirmation of retest of that 6619.83. That 4 hour, which gives us a little bit of a bullish potential right here to continue moving upwards towards 6,666, 6,670, and maybe even 6,684. As you can see, those numbers right here on the right, those are not just random numbers I'm picking out of my behind. So those are actually highly calculated and technical levels that are very well known and have been tested and confirmed multiple times. So as you can see, the gist of what I'm trying to say is, guys, don't think. Basically, a lot of people are going to be highly misled by this movement to the upside, that pseudo rally that we're going to have. And I've been warning, in fact, last week in advance, kind of mockingly, one of my members, making fun of this and talking about how I predicted Trump's tweet. Here is one of my members. Let me show you, boys and girls. Here is one of my members kind of making fun of, Greg predicting, sort of me predicting Trump's tweets and things and events 5 days in advance and whatnot. That is, of course, not the case. The thing I was actually able to do is merely identify the technical analysis, and so I was able to highlight how potentially within X amount of time, that bullish momentum that we're seeing is going to be translated by some misinterpretation of the war being over. Now, I'll tell you guys, first of all, those who are not up to speed, Trump did not completely reject nor remove the conditions, the ultimatum he put on the IRGC. He merely, first it was capped to 2 days, and then he sort of rolled back on his decision and said, well, that now that it's going to be extended to 5 days. Everybody suddenly misunderstood this and misinterpreted somehow, thinking that the war is all over. In fact, I can tell you here in Israel in the last several days, we've been getting missiles left and right. And so it does not feel like the IRGC is in full sort of tandem with what the US or Trump is saying. Although Trump is saying one thing, we are experiencing another. And I can tell you that firsthand because I actually do live in Israel. And it does not seem like the IRGC nor Hezbollah are trying or, planning to stop anytime soon. In fact, I think this is a fight to the end, if you will. Trump, I'm pretty sure, is not bringing all these forces into the Middle East for no good reason. I think he already made up his mind a long time ago. It is just this smoke screen sort of thing that he and Bibi has been doing for quite some time. And so given the structure of the price action and how the setup looked like, I had a presumption that somehow it's going to be, of course, war related, because we saw very similar signs when it comes to oil. We were able to read how potentially oil will be reacting in one way or another, again sort of retracing back down, potentially going a little bit more sideways, and we'll testing some of these levels again and again until it reaches the edge right here before we see another spike. So there is another spike expected in oil, bringing us back up to towards the above the $100 per barrel level. But before that happens, we still need to complete that process, or so it seems. As you can see, we're already gaining a little bit momentum right here on oil. On the daily, we are just about to have convergence, so it's not necessarily going to happen today. It may take a little while before we see that play out sort of and set up completely move and become a little bit more bullish. As we see, the setup is overall in the grand scheme of things is a lot more bullish, although we still have some bearish temporary tendency right here in the weekly. But remember, although bearish, still in overbought territory, so it's not that straightforward. I would probably arguably rely on it continuing to be a little bit more bullish given the larger time frame, which is the monthly. Seeing how we're still probably going to retest and go back to these 120 levels just fits the channel absolutely perfectly. In fact, as we know, we usually tend to have breakout and spend some time above this in terms of reasoning for whether it's slippage, various geopolitical events that will be the causality of it all. And again, that's kind of the very same thing that we had last week, and kind of why one of my members made fun of it, saying I was able to predict the whole event in advance. No, I was not. I was simply able to identify the setup of the market, right? So in advance, kind of understand where we're headed. So this, although temporarily bullish, right, and got to understand, even though daily is not as short as 1 minute, but even though daily is longer than those smaller time frames, it's inconsequential what we're going to see. It is probably going to be similar or equal to this sort of structure in some form or way. That again, there's that asymmetrical symmetry sort of behavior. It has a lot to do with more harmonic patterns, cyclicality, and so on. Of course, I highly recommend joining my community so you can actually understand what it is that I'm trying to say. There's a lot of factors, a lot of tools in technical analysis that are not well known, and I actually teach in my one-on-one academy, so you can become proficient and become an actual analyst for your own self and be able to analyze the market and understand where we're headed, instead of relying on these talking heads on Bloomberg, which probably do not have your best in a sort of success and intention in mind, right? So if we're looking at the 1 weekly time frame, which finally we are now in bearish territory, becoming a little bit more bullish. As we said, that does sort of jive very neatly with a similar or retest of what we had right here on the left side. In an uptrend, as you can see, we have various downtrends, shallow retest. That kind of is a normal behavior. This is what these red candlesticks stand for, right? Now, although we are on the back end of the cycle, of course, we will experience what? bullish corrections. That is kind of the negative of the front end. The back end is basically the other way around. So guess what? We are now headed still downwards within larger scale trend. Simply what we're seeing right now on the smaller time frames is that the entanglement, that movement inside of these time frames while we're headed downwards. And sometimes, yes, we will move a little bit more sideways with great volatility. All in all, for example, if you pay attention, understand the ranges we were in within that time period, we basically moved with great volatility sideways, revolving around that 67.44 level, and arguably even in fact revolving around that 6,666 level as well. As you can see on the deeper time frames, we saw that in fact that's originally where it was established, although we were in preparation for it. There are various rules why this level matters so much. So yeah, my assumption is that temporarily we're going to have that misleading whatever event, and I can tell you that the IRGC already rejected Trump's offer, and I don't know what this whole thing about the talks and how the IRGC, or at least Iran, again, I think maybe it's a play on words, or Trump is really misleading, using some smoke screen here just to drag out time until his military forces are in the vicinity and capable of executing the missions he wants them to execute. And until then, he's just sort of, dragging more time, wasting more time. And I think all that sentiment, that positive sentiment that we see, that is actually very temporary, because if we switch over to larger time frames, we realize we're extremely bearish. Nothing has changed. We are just merely experiencing a temporary correction. And although, for example, yes, weekly, in fact, in reality, is actually, by the way, bearish. The fact of the matter that we're having a temporary shallow correction, we are literally seeing that correction. Now, I am warning you, and I did warn, and I'm thinking that correction may extend a little bit. Now, is it reliable? Should it be as reliable as this left side of things? Probably not. In fact, as we know, fear is far stronger. And right now it seems that capitulation and just overall fear is stronger. So that's far more likely to have this downtrend to be a lot steeper. That's steeper. That means, again, we're not going to extend this right shoulder the same way we extended this left shoulder. So I wouldn't rely on a trade to the upside. Again, this is not financial advice. You do you. We still may end up having quite an extended shoulder right here, quite an extended move all the way correcting to 6,800. Yes, technically speaking, it is doable. Looking just at the beginning of this weekly, is it probable? Not very much so. Looking at our monthly, we realize we're extremely bearish, and looking at the surrounding time frames and its momentum, we realize that in reality, what we're experiencing right now is probably a very temporary event, and we're probably going to go back on the very same sort of course of the market, probably within a week or tops two, which probably by the time the U.S. forces that Trump is waiting for will arrive and his plan will be in full swing. By that time, probably, of course, officially these 5 days will expire. The IRGC will do something insane again to make Trump upset, which we know they do all the time. It's just a matter of him choosing to get upset at it or not. So in all reality, what we're getting right now is just a temporary pause. That's all it is. That temporary pause will be used by the market makers, by the various larger institutions, to mislead the confused retail trader to think that actually, oh look, the bottom has been found. Of course, there's always a ton of proponents that will tell you that the bottom, every other day that the market goes a little bit more sideways, instead of breaking more, they will tell you that the bottom was found. That's it, we hit the bottom from here now to the moon. That is not true. That's not how things work, and I highly recommend actually joining my community. While it's still heavily discounted, 6 days from now the discount will expire. In fact, if I may bring it up right here real quick, guys, don't forget, join in the community. Definitely ring the notification bell, right? When you do watch the videos, ring the notification bell, set it to all, otherwise you will not be informed. And if something changes in the market, you'll simply will not know about it. Do not forget to like the video, of course, very important. Follow me on X if you're on the platform. Make fun there and post various fun things, sometimes charts and information as well. Of course, most importantly, join the community. because right now it is $70 a month instead of being $100. It is 30% discounted. In fact, on top of the current sort of discount, you can get it to be only $56 a month. By paying annually and changing this little ticker, you'll get 20% on top of the current discount. So 56 instead of 70, or more, so 56 instead of 100, because in 6 more days this tier will become a $100 tier. All right, so through this you'll be able to join our monthly meetings, you'll be able to see my daily updates to the community and various other sort of activities we do. Of course, I'm not here to sell you this. I think you should invest in yourself and understand why this is imperative if you want to be able to do anything remotely similar to what I do and how I analyze the market, and sort of be prepared and understand where things are headed. That is all for today, boys and girls. I'll see you in the next one. Join the community. Do not forget to like, subscribe, and watch the other videos so you'll be properly informed and understand what it is that I'm expecting in the market, and rather why I'm expecting that very behavior. See you all in the next one. Bye bye.